I let my son watch it. He's 6. He loved it.
It kind of stemmed from Ghoulies Go to College, because even though Ghoulies Go to College has a lot of nudity in it, it still has this very weird, innocent sort of vibe about sex and relationships, where it's just, it's more like a kid like stole his dad's, like Playboy and looked at it for a couple of minutes and they got scared and put it away.
Right now, you're about to get some behind-the-scenes insight on Frankie Freako. We attended the premiere, and this Q&A features lead actor Conor Sweeney and the cinematographer Pierce Derks. Frankie Freako is a film that's been directed by Steven Kostanski. We had him on a few years ago around Psycho Goreman, and that was one of the most fun movies we ever seen, so obviously we were so excited to see this one. Lots of practical effects, throwback nostalgia, and this one is a love letter to anybody who loved all those creature movies of the 80s, from Critters, Gremlins, Ghoulies, Garbage Pail Kids, and much more. Hope you enjoy the Q&A.
Conor Sweeney and Pierce Derks. Keep it going. Wasn't this film fantastic?
This is the first time I've seen that on a big screen. Pierce, your photography is beautiful. Isn't his photography great?
Photography is beautiful. Conor, your acting is beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
You know, I've seen probably around 80 Little Rubber Monster movies, including this one. And it's kind of a lost art, right? Because in the 80s they were making tons of these up till the early 90s. And now we finally have a new one. So my understanding is, Pierce, you and Steve Kostanski were just plowing through dozens of these movies a couple Christmases ago. Explain the genesis for Frankie Freako.
Yeah, so one of the main genesis for the project was, it was kind of peak pandemic time and we had nothing to do, so I was hosting these bootleg virtual movie nights. And yeah, we were just watching all sorts of just weird stuff that we hadn't watched before. And for some reason, I don't even know why, but we got on this kick of watching all the little monster movies, but not like the main ones like Critters or whatever, but we watched those too, but we got really deep into like the Weird Empire, like Full Moon and the knockoffs and stuff like No Name Norm, and just went really, really deep into watching all these absurd little monster movies, and it kind of culminated with watching Ghoulies 3, Ghoulies Go to College.
Give it up for Ghoulies Go to College. They talk in that one.
If you haven't seen Ghoulies Go to College, it is fantastic. And it delivers everything that you want possibly out of a film called Ghoulies Go to College. But we realized when watching that amidst like all the craziness that was going on, just kind of the depressing news cycle and all the shit that was basically happening in the real world, that one of the most purest moments of joy that we had like over the past like year and a half was watching ridiculous little puppets prance around on screen doing the most stupid things. There was just this pure, almost kind of innocence to the film that was very childlike, that we realized like, oh, we're missing that. We want to do something like that for modern audiences. And yeah, about a year after that, 13 months, we were shooting Frankie Freako.
Yeah, there was also, Steve and I were sending each other videos back and forth, YouTube videos, and there's a compilation video of all of these 1-900 commercials from the 80s and 90s, and one of them was Freddy Freaker, which is Frankie Freako, basically.
Yeah, he's a rubber puppet.
And we were like, we got to make a movie about this guy. And yeah, Steve basically did the rest.
Yeah, I remember it was that marathon that kind of solidified things, but we were discussing kind of like, who would call that number? I remember Steve and I, we were having some downtime. It was one of the final days on set of In a Violent Nature, and we were discussing kind of like, yeah, who the hell would call the Freddy Freaker number? Like, who would be stupid to go
call any of these
that?
numbers? There was 1-900 Cry was one of them.
Yeah, there were videos online of 1-900 cries. You're just listening to people cry.
Yeah, or you cry.
If you cry, they talk you through a good cry.
Very
Yeah,
weird.
so that was also one of the genesis for the project. It was just trying to figure out like what type of person would call this number and like what would happen if they did. Like,
I'm feeling very judged because you seem to be insinuating that, I might be ridiculous for having called these numbers. You guys never called any of these numbers?
I would have. My parents would have let me.
Yeah, I wasn't allowed to.
I definitely wasn't allowed to, but I called them anyway. You find the credit card, right, and you go.
And there's no trace of these things. Like, there's the Freddy Krueger number that was a joke that I wrote for this. And I'm so desperate to hear like, did he just chirp you when you called, or
Yeah,
what?
it's all like lost
It's all
media now.
disappeared, and there's no trace of these things.
We'll have to track this down.
Yeah, that's. I'm desperate to hear what Freddy Krueger has to say to people when you call.
So you both worked with Steve a lot. Obviously, you've been in a lot of his films. What's going through your mind, Connor, when Steve gets in touch with you and he's like, I've written this part, you're going to star in the film, you're going to be on screen basically the entirety of the film, and 95% of the time you're just going to be acting with puppets. What did you think of that?
I'm used to the kind of grueling solo nature of shooting a Steve movie. This one, it came about so weird because he sent me like a page of a script first, with no treatment, no outline. It was just like the first couple of pages of a script, and it was Conor Sweeney. And I was like, okay, this has to be a temp name. He doesn't have a name for this character yet. And he eventually had a whole script where I'm playing myself for some, I don't know, still don't know the joke. I don't get the joke of me playing Conor Sweeney in it. But I did not expect it to be as, it makes you feel fucking crazy to not act with anybody for a whole movie. And not only was I not acting with anybody, I didn't act with the articulated puppets. So the ones that are blinking and moving their faces and stuff, I wasn't acting with those.
All the hero puppets, like we had 3 different versions of the puppets. We had an animatronic version that worked like maybe 10% of the time. We had like a more articulated hand puppets where you could like move their eyes and stuff. You could flap their mouths and they were kind of loose jointed, you could move them. Then we had like stiff puppets that you could kind of prop up and place in certain parts.
They were
parts
toys.
Of the set. Yeah, they were basically just like big toys, just all made out of silicone. They were pretty heavy. But yeah, for most of Conor's stuff, like it's like a lot of over the shoulder where we're kind of shooting over a puppet and Conor is having like a big like monologue, but what he's looking at is just
Yeah,
looking
toy.
at that the entire time, because we filmed all of Conor's stuff first in like the first about like what was this? Like about 18 days we filmed all of Conor's stuff, and then we had another week of filming just the puppets. So all the like hero shots of the puppets were done after the fact. So Conor was just acting off of basically a brick wall, and none of the voice actors were there. So it was all just the different random puppeteers, whoever was doing it. Like Frankie had like 5 different voices, whoever was operating it.
Yeah, there was no, and they were like exhausted, but they were not giving like real performances because they were tired, and they were just reading it for the first time while they're reading the script. And I'm like having to cry to them, and it was, you feel so nuts by the end of it.
Well, one of the, it's kind of your fault, Conor, that Steve decided that you could act against nothing, because another genesis for the project is we were shooting this ridiculous Psycho Goreman merch commercial where Conor was just like alone in this like a weird unsolved mystery style set, and he was just riffing and talking to no one, but we both found his performance in that so charming that we were like, oh yeah, let's figure out a movie for Conor to just.
It's one of the best parts of Psycho Goreman, that commercial.
The toy commercial?
Yeah.
Thanks. I'm not even in the movie. I am very briefly in the movie.
So there's the acting component of just acting to it like at a doll, and they're probably not giving you much to work off of. But in terms of like the visuals, when they're actually articulated and moving, you've got some human stuffed behind a chair somewhere, their arms getting tired. What kind of challenges do you face filming puppets, making sure that humans aren't in the shot?
Well, humans ended up in a lot of the shots, which is why I had to paint them out. Steve and I did most of the VFX. We had some shots that we weren't able to do, so some friends graciously helped us out, like a lot of the big freak world vistas with all the comps and stuff like that was done by Colin Cunningham, who's also in the film.
He's over here somewhere.
Yeah,
See his smiling face.
he's the board office employee that had morphs into Frankie during that meeting. But yeah, it's like honestly, the shooting the puppets wasn't really anything that new to me. Like a lot of my background is doing second unit insert photography. Like I've done work with Steve over the years, shooting a lot of stuff at the end of the projects where like the money's run out. It's usually me and Steve in like an effects shop, and one of us is operating a puppet while we're kind of looking back over a monitor and being like, "Does this work? Is this something this kind of works?" But the more interesting thing was that we wanted to shoot the puppets in the film, but in a way that felt like it could possibly be like this lost film from like the early 90s that someone dug up on a VHS. Because one of the things that like I love about Bob Clark's Christmas Story is the fact that that movie, even though it's done in the 80s, it's not trying to look like it's done in the 80s. It's trying to feel like it's like pulled from that time period. So we were never like, the discussion was never to make like Frankie look good per se. It was to make it like look authentic. So it was a lot of like hard directional sources. Also, to give a big shout out to my gaffer, Doug Cunningham. Like we had a very small team. Like it was just like two-person camera team, myself operating, and then one gaffer, and then one grip. So this was like a very, very small crew that did all this.
And it all looked very impressive. I want to squeeze one quick one in before opening it to the audience, but I feel like the costume designer on this film, whoever, I'm not sure who it was, must have seen Zardoz, right? Because the last third of the movie, you're in something that is very reminiscent of what Sean Connery wore in Zardoz. Didn't he look fantastic in the Zardoz outfit? You looked very sexy in it. Did you feel sexy in it? And what was it like traipsing around
We
in
did
that?
not ask Connor to get ripped for the role. He just decided to do that all.
Just showed up looking ripped.
I get like skinnier and skinnier, you can see like progressively throughout the movie. It was such an unpleasant costume. I could not have felt less sexy in that. It was so unpleasant, and it was cold at that time of the year. We were in a warehouse that was unheated.
Yeah, so it started out when he's like in all the sweaters. It was still like
It was too hot.
It was too hot. But the time we got to filming the like the Zardoz outfit, it was cold. So he was just like kept having to be draped with all these blankets in between takes.
Yeah, I read it in the script, and I was like, I know I'm not gonna like whatever he comes up with, and he made it worse than I expected.
What happened with that costume? Did you take it home as a memento?
Are you asking because you want?
I mean, you're like, what, like an inch or two taller than me? I could probably grow into this thing.
I don't know where. Steve's probably still got it. He probably wears it.
I was just lying. You're like 4 inches taller than me, at least. Does anyone in the audience have a question? No one wants to hear questions from me.
Stole my question.
Does anybody else have a question? Yes, sir.
Yeah, just you guys answered a lot of my questions about acting with puppets, but Connor, what was your experience of like almost acting to no one and then seeing the final product? Like, what was your reaction to see it all come together?
Yeah, that was what I was most excited about when I read the script, and seeing it come together. The puppet faces are so cool. The only time that I really like experienced the puppet seeing, like I could see what it was going to be on screen was the part where I'm sticking the gun in the face when they're laying in bed, because it's like the only time that I couldn't stop laughing, because I put the gun to his head and their little chests were breathing, and it was so funny, holding the gun, like pressing it against his head,
and
his
because
face
like
getting
their
squished.
face is made of silicone, it's all squishy. That's why we insert all those like noises when they're blinking and moving. Because they were squishy little fellows, so it just made it that much more absurd.
And you filmed this on a set, right? So you were like cutting holes in walls for puppeteers to get through?
Yeah, that was the genesis of the minecart crashing through the wall, is that I don't remember what we had on the page, but it was originally something far less elaborate, but we were just like, what if we just crash this thing through a fucking wall?
Well, the like genesis of it, a lot of it was I was watching like house destruction movies, like The Money Pit and of unknown origin, movies where people progressively destroy their house over time, and I was like, those are fun movies where people fuck their house up. And so this was before Frankie Freako, and then Steve kind of got the idea to do that in the movie, but lots of it was the art department just like saying, yeah, you can tear that wall down. There was when the minecart came through the wall, it knocked the wall down, and it made the roof cave in. Right?
Yeah,
like
the first take, like the minecart was released early, and then it like came crashing through, and then like the roof was starting to collapse.
and you could see like people falling from above, like grabbing on.
But
the whole roof collapsed.
But yeah, big shout out to the art department, because they were just like, well, I guess we just don't have the scene. They're like, give us an hour, and then they
we thought the day was done.
Yeah, they completely rebuilt it.
They rebuilt the house. Yeah.
I would have thought you'd only have one chance to get that right. You got two.
Yeah, no kidding.
That's not bad. Do we have another question? I am gonna point to this person right over there. It's, I think, a black kid. Yeah, you.
The character design of Munchie, I mean, it just looks so familiar, but I can't put my finger on it. Do you know the genesis of the creation of that character?
Well, Munch is he's a lot of the Freak bad guys is inspired by like Tim Burton's Batman '89. Just he's very Nicholson originally, but we were originally toying with the idea of just having like a Nicholson impression doing. Then I think it was, were you the one that pitched Rich Evans doing the voice of?
Yeah.
Yeah. Rich
Yeah,
Evans
he did
from
Red Letter Media.
Yeah, I think that he was on set and like a Nicholson impersonation.
Yeah, he was. That's the way that kind of Steve imagined him. That's the way he was always kind of talking about them. But then as soon as you mentioned Rich, we were just like, oh yeah, that could work. And we were expecting him just to deliver like a very straightforward, just in his own voice performance.
Yeah, it's like high pitched.
Yeah, because he did a cameo in Psycho Goreman as was it Gore Trapper? He's like the big guy with the cannons that shoot blood. But yeah, he sent the file in, and we were all just like so impressed. Like, oh no, he's actually giving us like a full-on character. He's giving us a full-on performance. Our the name Munch 2 comes from our own sort of headcanon. We were watching all those absurd little monster movies. Was the movie Munchie and then Munchie Strikes Back that leaves like a cliffhanger promising future sequels. And he's like such a bastard in that movie. We figured that, oh, he's got to become corrupted by his power at some point. And so in our headcanon, he becomes Munch. He ends up like taking over the freak world.
Those Munchie films are some classic Jim Wynorski movies.
Yeah.
And I assume Mr. Beekler is a tribute to John Carl Beekler,
Yeah, it
director of Ghoulies Go to College. Do we have another question in the audience? Yes, you in the back with your hand up.
What's your favorite thing that was cut from either the script or earlier drafts?
It was so lean. What was there anything that got any sequences that got cut?
There weren't full sequences that got cut, just little things. Earlier on, Connor's character in the first sort of act of the film was a lot more angrier, and that's something that we kind of toned down.
That's true.
And that we reduced, just because once we got to that scene of him and Christina in the car sort of talking, we realized like, oh no, this is Connor's character. This guy who, like, he's a square, but the big problem is that he just doesn't want to admit it. He's embarrassed by that, and he's frustrated with that instead of just learning to accept it. And yeah, originally he was a lot more angry, a lot more, just kind of aggressive, trying to fill that kind of classic, kind of late 80s sort of male like ego stereotype of a successful.
My instinct is always seething rage, and I had to tamp that down once Steve decided. There was a visual gig that I really liked. That was like the only thing that you and Steve both disagreed with me, and I was like, it's the only time that all three of us like really disagreed about something. And it was, I forget when even it was. Do you remember when I had my shirt sticking out my fly for like a whole sequence, unmentioned?
Yes,
and
that was during the boardroom sequence, I think.
Oh right, that was it. The
Yeah.
boardroom. I
And
wanted
then-
my shirt sticking on my fly like a dick the
Yeah.
whole time.
I was kind of indifferent. Steve was against it.
Yeah, I still think I was right.
Speaking of funny visuals in the film, like Adam Brooks looks utterly ridiculous in this movie, especially the white cashmere sweater with the ponytail and the ring. But the glue scene, the scene where he's getting doused in glue, what was it like, filming that? And do you think that Adam Brooks will ever agree to work with Steve Kostanski again?
He was
already
miserable.
He's already worked with Steve again, so I guess he'll continue.
He was miserable. It was that's another day that it was ice cold.
Yeah.
And he was getting covered with goo.
Yeah, that was like a cold industrial basement. That was just a space that our art team had, so we kind of rigged it around and set the dress up. But yeah, that was.
There was also
it was not comfortable.
There was no shower there, so he had to take a car, the way that he is in that scene, and drive to another location that had a cold shower.
Once he's in the big like hardened cocoon, that's just like a giant like piece of like silicone that you can kind of drape over him, and then we dress him with a little bit of goo afterwards. But that initial, when you see the pour falling on him, and he's just like, when you see him like his eyes closed and just completely not reacting, I think that's just a survival mechanism to just try to pretend that he was somewhere else doing something much more pleasurable.
He's great in the film, and just looking at him in that sweater, like walking down the
Oh,
stairs.
and that ponytail. That
Ponytail.
once we got him in the ponytail,
He was
like,
so
this
unhappy.
is Mr. Beekler.
He was so unhappy when he saw that outfit and that ponytail. He's like, you couldn't make me a little bit cool, just a little. He was as uncool as you could get.
The editor was pretty cool. Does anyone else have a question? There were a bunch of hands up earlier, and now everybody's being shot. Yes?
Okay, some of my first memories are like mainlining these weirdo puppet movies on VHS on loop. but I realized I probably didn't have very good parents. What age would you say you were comfortable introducing this movie to your kids?
I let my son watch it. He's 6. He loved it. It's the first movie of mine that he's allowed to watch, and he really liked it.
Yeah, it wasn't something we talked about ahead of time, but it just kind of morphed as we were doing the film, like, oh yeah, this should be like a PG-13, where all the stuff that's implied, it's more from the mindset of like a 9-year-old that doesn't know what these things are. That's why like the Freakos and stuff are partying. Their version of partying is, you know, staying up all night, drinking soda, eating pizza, hot dogs, and chips, and listening to music. It's all very, very, you know, tame by comparison. And the same with like Conor, sort of like you know, hot and steamy sessions with his wife.
Yeah, sex is like an abstract.
Yeah, it's so it just that it kind of stemmed from Ghoulies Go to College, because even though Ghoulies Go to College has a lot of nudity in it, it still has this very weird, innocent sort of vibe about sex and relationships, where it's just it's more like a kid like stole his dad's, you know, like Playboy and looked at it for a couple of minutes and they got scared and put it away. But yeah, with this, it just kind of morphed organically into being something that was more PG-13, because we didn't want to go too hard.
Turn that off.
It's because there's another version of this movie that's a lot snarkier and kind of making fun of those movies that we're riffing on, but we wanted to be kind of almost like a sincere tribute to the silliness of those projects.
I think that was my signal for one last question. Is there one last question that we want to? Is that it? Yeah. Yes, you.
All right. So seeing that Adam and Matthew and you and Steven are back, is there a potential for a next Astron 6 style movie?
We would love that. We've always got ideas. We're always talking to each other about potential ideas, but the difficult thing is money. If there's any rich people,
Anybody here have money?
lots of it. Yeah, we've always got ideas, and we would love to make something else. This was so fun to have everybody, the band, back together, and it kind of made us all miss it and want to do it again. So we really hope that we can do something else.
You absolutely should do it again. And thanks to you all for being here, and thank you so much for Conor Sweeney.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.